folks, and welcome to The Breakdown. You're back on LPTV with us once again in our streaming television experiment. We're bringing you the folks in and around the Lincoln Project to talk to you about the news of the day. And man, what a time to be alive. We are rapidly approaching 200,000 Americans dead from COVID. We have about 53 days left to go in this presidential race. We're here to give you, as I said, an inside look at what's happening in this campaign. With me are my good friends Steve Schmidt and Mike Madrid, both founders of the Lincoln Project. And we are going to talk tonight about all the things having to do with this pandemic. And, you know, I noticed today it's that moment after Labor Day, and Steve, you and I have talked about this, where you almost start to think that the world's going to change, fall's coming, all those rituals and traditions of fall, from football seasons to family visits to holidays to Halloween and Thanksgiving. And yet this year, because Donald Trump lied and lied and lied again about COVID, that's really been blown up. And it's really been through the looking glass in a lot of ways. And that looking glass this time included an October surprise. And this one was delivered by Bob Woodward. So I want to talk to you a little bit, both of you, about these. We're going to play a clip of video now of Bob Woodward and the president. I want to launch right into talking to both of you about it and the consequences of these lies. So we go ahead and roll that COVID opener.
Mr. President, don't you think if you were more forthright with the American people, more lives could have been saved?
It goes through air, Bob. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
On average, you lose from 26,000 to 70,000 or so, and even in some cases more from the flu. And they ask, what's the difference? It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear. It'll go away. It will go away. Just stay calm.
Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
I think we've done, from every standpoint, a incredible job.
Well, Steve, I'll just start with you. What are your thoughts on the Woodward revelations and the scope of what is happening about this story right now?
None of this had to happen is what it means. None of it had to happen. And let's just break it down. President of the United States, Donald Trump, who takes a 35-word oath, whose most solemn duty to preserve, protect, defend the Constitution of the United States, to protect the American people. He failed utterly in that duty, and more profoundly than any American has ever failed in their duty at an essential moment in a crisis in the entire history of not just the presidency, but the country. It is a level of failure that is simply staggering, and it beggars the imagination. Now, we know for sure now, he knew, and he went out and he said to the country, you should take a household disinfectant. You should drink Lysol or take hydrochloroquine or to take something else. He told us that it would go away, that it was a Democratic hoax. He told us the fake news media made it up. 200,000 Americans are dead. 200,000. Before this is over, we will have more dead Americans than we had killed in the Second World War. This will be the most deadly event in the nation's history, maybe exceeding even the Civil War. Now, in addition, we have a shattered economy. We have 1 million broken dreams in this country. We have people who worked their entire life. We have people that saved, that sweated, and it's all gone. We have the high school and college and grammar school educations of every kid in this country profoundly disrupted. And then what you talked about, Rick, which is maybe the most tragic of all, is that the American way of life has come to an end. You can't go to a wedding or to a funeral. Right. You can't hold a parent's hand if they're at the end of their life. You can't be there for the birth of a grandchild. You can't do any of the things that you used to be able to do. You can't go to a high school football game on Friday night. You can't go to a tailgate on Saturday afternoon. It's all over. And it's because of Donald Trump and his complete, utter failure. And until and unless we get rid of the fool behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, we have no chance of getting beyond this. It is truly a horrific moment to understand that very much at its beginning was completely avoidable.
Mike, how about you? What do you think the political impacts of this are going to be now that we know he knew? We know he lied. We know this is unspinnably bad for him, right? This is not something where he just gets to walk away from this one.
Yes, I mean, look, he's on tape. It is inescapable. It is unavoidable. It's irrefutable. And I think that's what is going to be the difference maker on this issue in terms of public opinion and where things stand in the race. Look, there has been one survey, Rick, that has come out. The Monmouth poll came out today that showed some of the early results as it related to the response to the Atlantic story when he called our fallen soldiers losers and suckers. And while there was a very marked change in the way that people felt about Biden's positive support, his positives went up exponentially with the way they view his handling and respect for the military. Donald Trump's dropped by an equal margin. There was very little movement actually in the race, which speaks to this really sad situation and how stratified we are when even issues like that aren't moving yet. I believe that they will. In fact, Steve and I were talking about this earlier. It's the constant drip, drip, drip of what is coming out on a daily basis now is more and more people are conveying to the American people just how dangerous a situation it is that we are in. I believe, again, because you have his voice on a number of issues. And by the way, remember, we've only heard a couple hours of the 18-hour interview. There's still more that is going to drop here. This story is not done. I think it's going to bleed out for a period of time. I think the Atlantic story is going to keep bleeding out over a period of time. And I think as more and more of those stories roll out, I think it's going to empower others to come forward and saying, you know what, I heard this, and this is, I'll put my name on this, and this is also what the president said. That has to have a compounding effect. The unfortunate part is it probably isn't going to take him down to zero like all of us as rational human beings, I think, would expect it probably would be. But the Trump fever is a serious one. The cult runs deep, and it's a tough floor to break with his support levels. But I'm convinced at some level they are going to move lower, at least in the wake of the revelations of both the Woodward book and the Atlantic story.
I think if you're a Trump supporter watching these videos and listening to these Woodward videos, where you cannot say it's fake news, you can't say that's not him, he made it up. He was bragging to people that he wanted to do the Woodward interviews. This is a guy who thought he was going to prank Bob Woodward. He thought he was going to get Bob Woodward and con him. So I think we've got another clip of Bob Woodward from some of the things that have been released so far. So let's go ahead and play that.
And so what was President Xi saying yesterday?
Well, we were talking mostly about the virus, and I think he's going to have it in good shape. But you know, it's a very tricky situation. It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. You know, people don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per. You know, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. You know, so this is deadly stuff.
I mean, Steve, when you hear that, what's going through your head when you hear the degree and specificity of that confession?
It's the most shocking dereliction of duty in American history, bar none. You have someone who understood how deadly this was, and this was a carnival of stupidity, carnival of dishonesty, carnival of self-interest, political interest at the expense of the nation. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of dead people, and when he stood up there every day telling the country that it was a hoax, Democrats were lying about it. Let's talk about the Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Every one of those Republicans knew how dangerous this was. Every one of those Republicans, every single one of them, 100% of them, knew he was lying when he was saying the things that he was saying at these briefings. Am I allowed to use profanity on the streaming service? Just am I?
You are.
I am, right? And not one of them, right? Not one went down to the Oval Office and looked him in the eye, not one staffer apparently, and said, "What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck is wrong with you?" Right? We got 10,000 dead people. We got 20,000 dead people. Right? What's the number when he's going to pull his head out of his ass? Right? 200,000 people. 200,000 souls. Unbelievable.
Yep.
And the moral failure here, is beyond articulation, beyond my abilities of articulation in the English language. It is shocking. And what is the premise here that the 30% of the country that is trying to impose its political will over the rational 70% of the country, the hardcore Trump support, right? What is it? He has his incompetence has led to 200,000 dead people, a shattered economy, the education of every kid in the country down the shitter. They want to give him 4 more years. I mean, there's 4 more years.
It boggles the mind.
It is beyond the beyond. And look, I said before he took office, I said I thought that there was a real lack of imagination in the American mind about the capacity for there to be a real tragedy. Right? The default condition of the world is not peace and prosperity. It's death and suffering. And so in the same way that understanding what a broken leg is and having one are two very different things, we understand now what tragedy looks like. And this is going to get much, much worse. It's going to get much worse over the course of the winter. And it is out of control. And it's out of control because of deliberate, willful, premeditated lying, bullshit, nonsense for months and months and months. And now we can't get this genie back in the bottle. Unbelievable.
As you said, it requires enablers at every level in that White House. And look, we all know there's never been a whole bunch of courageous voices in that White House, but now there are none. They are the worst of the worst sycophants I think we've ever seen around a president. No one is willing to say, this is nuts, you're killing people, shut up, this is crazy. Not one of them is willing to. And the enabler in chief coming up right after Donald Trump in the rank order is Mike Pence. I've got a little clip I want to play of Pence today that just once again illustrates that this is a man with absolutely zero moral clarity on Donald Trump at all. So we're going to roll that clip, guys.
I couldn't be more proud of the response of the American people, more proud of the response of health officials in every agency of government, states across the country, and I couldn't be more proud of the strong, steady leadership that President Donald Trump brought to this coronavirus pandemic from day one.
Mike?
I mean, like literally, right? This guy puts Baghdad Bob to shame, right? It is, right? And listen, Mike Pence is full of shit at a whole next level, and the squinty-eyed sincerity. This is someone who made a career out of telling people that cigarette smoking wasn't bad for them. That's what he did. So talk radio host, one of our favorite ads of the cycle, the adultery spot with Mike Pence holding forth on adultery. I mean, this is a man utterly lacking in conviction and core principles. He is an empty vessel. I mean, if you had some nefarious, if you were looking for a back on the TV show 24, right? You knew that vice president was up to no good, right? Right from the first episode that he came in, right? Like if you brought a guy like Pence in to read for that part, there's no way he'd get it because nobody could believe that anyone could be so soulless, principleless, and generally shitty as a human being as this guy. It's unbelievable. And I mean, this is. I mean, there's never in the history of the country been a bigger upgrade on the ballot available for the country to pick between Kamala Harris and that fool.
Mike, jump in.
Yeah, look,
It's
let
Pence
me
fashion time.
Yeah, well, before we get to Pence or continue with Pence, let me play out the previous part of the conversation earlier, because this is really important for people to understand. Right before we went live here streaming on LPTV, Donald Trump was on stage at another rally, thousands of people, maskless, talking about how successful the United States of America was in handling the COVID crisis, saying that had he not taken swift early action on closing the borders with China, that many, many more hundreds of thousands of other people would be dead. That the United States of America has handled this situation better than any other country in the entire world. Literally, these are his pronouncements. So even after getting his hand caught in the cookie jar, and I say that to be nicely, he blatantly lied, knowing that his fellow countrymen would die. He continues to do it. And the enablers around him that you guys were just exhorting continue to this day to remain silent. They remain quiet. They enable this through their silence. They allow this to continue. And that is a preview, if you still need one, of what is going to continue, probably accelerated, if this madness is not stopped in 54 short days. That should strike fear in the heart of every American, that even the death of our countrymen, the surrounding enablers who remain quiet when he was caught, but more importantly, the gall of him to go out the very next day to take the stage in front of thousands of people, knowing it is unhealthy to do, acknowledging that in a press conference yesterday, taking the complete opposite action the next day, and the hundreds of people around him, both professional staff and elected officials, who refuse to call it out for what it is a striking moment in human history, let alone American history. I don't know of any situation, any correlate action, shy of people turning guns or gas on their own people, that has allowed this 200,000. We are talking about 200,000 people. I don't know what else to say. I'm speechless.
You know, this is also something, guys, that we've been talking about a little bit, because they've been racing to reopen everything, and because they've been turned masks into a sort of an insult rather than a precaution. We're about to go into the fall where every one of these epidemiological experts, every one of these virus experts says we're going to have a second wave hit us in a couple of weeks. Now, it's also happening because they reopen schools without a plan. They reopen colleges without a plan. These people have built a machine that is going to kill more Americans. There are some estimates that we could have 500,000 dead Americans by the end of this year, which is a shocking, mortifying number. And I have a message for the people around Trump who are remaining silent, who are remaining cowering in the dark. Not only the elected folks who support him in the Senate and the House, but people working in the White House. At the end of all this, and all these bodies are out there, there will be a reconciliation in this country. And people like you who stay silent, who stay by this man, who defend him until the last, there will be accountability in our society for you. You will find a moment when people find out you worked in the Trump White House and Americans were dying by a 9/11 every day, that you are shunned and you are out of society as it is constituted. Because there is a point in this country where you're not just engaged in helping the president, you're engaged in abetting manslaughter by this man. But in other cheerful news, and a more uplifting point, the Woodward tapes revealed a lovely schism, as we like to say right here, like crabs in a bucket. Last night on the Tucker Carlson White Power Fish Stick Hour, he attacked Lindsey Graham. And I mean, Lindsey got it from both sides yesterday. We took it to Lindsey pretty hard. And then Tucker Carlson took it to Lindsey because Lindsey Graham facilitated the Woodward interview. I mean, Steve, you've got to be eating that up with a spoon.
So we were joking around about this earlier in the day. Apparently, the two people that talked Trump into this are Kayleigh McEnany and Lindsey Graham. And Kayleigh McEnany of Harvard Law School, and as I tell young people who are at state universities, don't worry about it. I said, once you've been in the workplace long enough, you meet some very smart people who have Harvard degrees hanging on their wall for sure, some brilliant people. But trust me, that school produces more than its fair share of morons also. And, one of them is loose in the West Wing. I'll tell you, I remember when I was in the White House, right? And I got a call from Bob Woodward who wanted to talk to me. I treated that phone like it was like an anthrax vial, right? Like there was no way. Like it was terrifying, right? Wanted no part of that, like whatsoever. And the notion that Bob Woodward and Donald Trump and according that Kayleigh McEnany's assessment that Trump can handle him no problem. Holy shit. Right. And what's going to be great about this, right, coming into the election is that you have a accurate summation, a closing document of what goes on in this big top of just stupidity. His stupidity and incompetence is lethal. And it's going to be great to see the total content of this book. It's going to be astonishing.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be frightening, but it is a wake up call, to everybody in this country. This country is at the abyss. We are in a precipitous and dangerous decline. And he has got to go. He is incapable of doing the job of president of the United States. And the whole country is suffering because of it. Every person shares in the grief of this, the loss of this, the restrictions to life. And again, it did not have to happen. And if George Bush was the president, if Hillary Clinton was the president, Barack Obama, Mitt Romney, John Kerry, Al Gore, it would not have happened. It would not have happened.
I mean, that's the most damning thing in the Woodward story is Robert O'Brien, his own national security advisor at the end of January said, this is going to be big. This is going to be the biggest thing you've ever faced. This is going to be the thing that defines your administration. And he still spent 2.5 months lying every goddamn day to the American people. It's just, I mean, and I think a lot of us on this side of the equation, I mean, Mike, you can speak to this. Everybody always keeps wondering, like, what's going to finally take him out? What's the silver bullet? I think you're right, Mike. I think it's sort of an accretion over time of these things that finally gets him.
Yeah, I mean, look, you'll recall we have heard, the grab him by the pussy tapes, right? That was in his voice too. That wasn't enough to turn him off, the voters off. Look, this will be a death by 1,000 cuts. The question is, how many of these cuts will be deep enough to move the needle in the right direction in order to make sure that we are rid of this menace in November? The good news is the totality of all of this stuff over the past 3.5 years, almost 4 years now, has been accumulating, and there is now what appears to be a pretty rigid ceiling in his support levels. And even if we don't see, in polling, massive drops in his support, what we are seeing is a further cementing of this historic stratification of the support levels between these two candidates. And what I mean by that is Joe Biden is consistently polling at a bottom range of 49 to 48 points, oftentimes getting to 50 or 51. It's not moving. The floor is solid. People have decided. There are not that many decideds left. Yes, there are some movements, especially in some of the Rust Belt states, where some of those blue-collar, non-college educated white workers are coming home to him until the Lincoln Project goes in with a couple of ads and things change it up a little bit. But what it is happening is there's very little room for undecideds. He's going to have to dramatically overperform with undecideds on top of consolidating his base by 100% in order to get through and pull another inside straight. Keep in mind, there are far more battleground states than there were in 2016. We were focused like a laser beam on 7 or 8 states. We're now like a 13, 14, 15 states, depending on how you define them. So,
right.
Look, you shouldn't be looking, viewers should not be looking at polls to see massive movements regardless of what comes out. You need to look at the slow erosion, and you need to look at the steady pace in which voters are cementing their opinions as it currently exists in this race, and that does appear to be happening at this moment in time.
I just wonder.
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
I mean, I just wonder what it's like in the White House. Is it like the scene from the movie Downfall when the generals are gathered around the desk of the Fuhrer, who's moving the imaginary armies around, right, ordering the Sixth Army, right, to attack the Russians, right, to repel them from Berlin and march them back. I mean, I would love to know. I will say this about the Woodward book, and I should have said this earlier. Now, if you made me guess, right, I would have said that it was his disinterest and incompetence that was lethal, that he wouldn't read the intelligence briefings, that he wouldn't pay attention, that he just was oblivious to what's going on, right? And that's the question around Trump, right? Is like, where does the malice start and the incompetence end, right? You know, what is the motivation, right, for the disastrous act, right, that follows? And so what I find really surprising and is the worst case scenario, right, in terms of Trump's failure here, is he actually knew. He actually knew how dangerous this was. He was able to grasp and absorb that and just willfully and premeditatedly tried to talk his way out of it, that he could bullshit his way out of it. And the truth of the matter is, right, if it's not broken, why fix it? And the sad reality is Donald Trump has gotten away with bullying and bullshitting his way through everything in his life, from failed casinos and airlines and a fake university, presidential, Republican primary. But here's the deal. What he's talking about tonight is fantasy. Did a good job?
Sure.
No one believes that, right? That chaos will break out across America. Chaos has broken out across America on Donald Trump's watch. And that's why he's in this political death spiral. It will get crazier as we get closer. The claims will be more outlandish. And it is infuriating to hear someone spout such utter nonsense and bullshit with conviction and see people mindlessly cheering for it, because the consequences, should they be successful in their goal, are disastrous for all of our families, our communities, our states, our country, and our grandkids' futures. We will take years and years and years as a country, if not decades, to recover from this Trump presidency and the damage that it's done. And before it's over, he's going to do a lot more damage. And that's the tragic part about all of this, because none of it had to happen.
Can I say,
well, folks? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, to Steve's point, and this is really important, we always do chalk up what Donald Trump does to incompetence. But when you listen to that tape, he is coherent, he is knowledgeable, he's talking about this being a deadly, dangerous virus by a factor of 5. He was briefed. Mm-hmm. He knew. He was not kind of like the fading old man, let the fading old man in here. He knew. And for him to double down on this and protect that position is unconscionable, because it becomes not just stubbornness and belligerence. Look, I also got to ask the question. I was a press secretary in a previous life for an Assembly Republican leader. Who allows a president to sit down with Bob Woodward for 18 hours? I mean, I can
In
see him
many
make a
of the
slip and
cases
allow
with no right, in many of the cases with no aid in the room at all, which just some of this was him calling from the residence in the middle of the night. I mean, and I think that's a good point, though, Mike. Is we do often ascribe things to Trump of being an idiot or bumbling, but in this case, he is. There's a consciousness of guilt now that can be established here. He knew what he was facing, and he went out on that podium during the whole briefing frenzy and lied and lied and lied and lied. So, guys, we could beat Trump's mendacity to death every day, but let's move to a more cheerful subject, and that is that Donald Trump's campaign is broke, or at least broke adjacent. They have spent, and we keep going over this number like $1 billion goddamn dollars. They're like
in American money.
Something. In American money, right? It's not even rubles, right? Or reals. It's
In American money.
dollars. And they are now cash flowing their campaign. And there's a reason why you start taking ads off the air. We said this a couple weeks ago. Mike and I were having this conversation like, why is he going dark here? Why is he going dark there? We're all talking back and forth. And there's one argument that it's, maybe the message isn't working. Well, it looks like now it's because they don't have the money to keep their ads up on TV. Now, folks, don't get too far ahead of yourself on this. You still got a good cash flow coming in, but they are now not in a position like Joe Biden is. Joe Biden has $300 million in the bank, and he's hammering Trump with it on TV and digital. But I mean, Steve, have you ever seen a campaign that has so much grift and skim in it that they go through $1 billion?
I can't. So I was talking to our friend David Plouffe about this, and during the Obama campaign, we were out. Obama opted out of the public financing and outspent McCain by $300 million. So we were strained in the fall. We didn't run out of money, right? We didn't run out of money. How do you run out of money? How do you run out of money having spent $1 billion in August? It's astonishing. And you read the reports of it, and I'm 49 years old. I've been working in campaign politics since I was 22. I can't figure it out. I cannot conceivably figure out what it is they spent $1 billion on. This truly is. We were talking about this at our morning meeting the other day, Rick. We were talking about Goodfellas, right, and the Lufthansa heist.
That's right.
Right? Maury the wigmaker, right? I did this the Lufthansa heist where it's like knocking over a parking meter compared to this, right? This is the great heist, right? Like, so never before has so much money ever been stolen and pocketed and grifted and spread out to who the fuck knows where and what Swiss bank account where. But oh my God, it is beyond. It is beyond belief. And just like people who paid good money for their Trump degree, right? The donors who pump money into this, I mean, good God, just unbelievable.
My favorite part of this story was in the last 24 hours where Trump floated out. He goes, well, I'll spend whatever I have to of my own money to keep the campaign going. Donald, my favorite thing I ever learned about Donald Trump was in August of 15. I went to see a hedge fund guy who funded some big super PAC stuff I'd done before. And I was like, I'd bought into the Trump illusion, right? I said, listen, the guy's a billionaire. He could crush Marco and Jeb and da-da-da-da. And this guy leans back in his chair and he goes, let me tell you something. I'm a billionaire. Donald Trump is not a billionaire. He is a clown living on credit. Those words never escaped me. And that anyone who believes that Donald Trump's about to plow $100 million or more of his own money into this campaign needs to turn in their Trump University degree and get rid of the Trump steaks in their freezer because they're insane.
Their Trump airline frequent flyer card. I mean, it is.
Yep. So we got a couple more numbers here that have just been popping up on my screen. So according to advertising analytics, the Trump campaign spent $0 this week in the past week in Arizona, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. Now, Mike, would you consider any of those battleground states?
I would consider them battleground states. I would also look there for people that have not done campaigns before. The two most frightening words in a campaign are going dark. It means you're
Yes.
out of cash, done, and you're exposed. You're a sitting duck out there just waiting to take incoming fire. And it was about the time where Joe Biden reported raising $365 million in a month. Like that number is equally as staggering. That is a historic haul of cash, a definite sign of support. But I don't think people understand the impact of literally having no message up in the middle of September and pulling out of battleground states. Right. I think I've had a conversation with each of you saying, what the hell does this even mean? Have you seen anything like this before? Because I've never seen it. And of course, you guys were, what you just said, Rick, it's the grift. They've just so overstolen from their own campaign in ways that we have not even been able to find it or see it and look at it. And the question for us on the political side of stuff was, do we try to track down this spend, and how do we look for a plan B to figure out what the strategy is here? The reality is there isn't one. They just stole it from their own coffers to such an extent that they weren't even monitoring how much money was going out, and whatever commitments they hadn't made, they had to renege on because there's no money to fulfill the obligation.
Well, the other amazing
thing.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was saying the other amazing thing that we now know about this, right? So Bill Steppe, and the new campaign manager, right, is not a grifter, right? He's a professional Republican political operative, right, who is technically proficient, right, involving all of the aspects of a campaign. And so whenever it was that he took over, we now know for certain he's literally spent all day, every day in meetings, staring at spreadsheets, trying to figure out where the fucking money went. That's what that guy has done from morning to afternoon to night, every day, trying to figure out where the money went, what their cash flow is, and how they're not going to be in a situation during the debates and after the debate where they can't be on TV, where they can't execute their digital targeting campaigns, where they can't execute the get out the vote activities, where they can't fund the victory campaigns in the state parties. And the fact that these guys are not on television is one of the most astonishing things.
Remarkable,
right? As someone who's done this, for my career, it's one of the most astonishing things professionally I've ever seen. It's astonishing.
The Biden raising $350 million, there's not like a 50% Biden family tax being taken out of that money. Whereas all this stuff that's getting shoved into Brad Parscale's, operation and going God knows where, Biden's got $350 million in actual money, not in, we kind of sort of raised all this money and it's going to disappear into various Trump family enterprises or coffers. We heard this week, folks, that they stopped data modeling. So they're not looking at their voter file. They had to stop doing their data modeling. They're not looking at voters. Like Mike spends his day looking at voters in our voter file. They're not doing those analytics. They're not figuring out where to target, where to go. They've stopped a lot of their polling. They never had a big field operation, but that stuff is all slowing down. And basically right now, it is a fundraising campaign and digital advertising on Facebook. It has really gotten very constrained in the last couple of weeks, and it's going to have some really interesting impacts on this thing. Well, guys, it is about time for us to wrap up and call it a night here on LPTV. We thank everyone for joining us once again. This is our little streaming experiment. We hope you have some fun and enjoy it, and listen to us get a little loose here at night. And thank you again for joining us here on The Breakdown. We've got one more ad to show you that is out right now about the COVID situation. So we're going to roll that, and then we're going to roll out of the show. And I want to thank Steve and Mike, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
It's the greatest responsibility of a president to help keep Americans safe, to protect our families. Donald Trump has failed this solemn duty. Over 170,000 Americans have died in the past few months from COVID-19. Millions are infected, and there is no plan. No plan to contain the virus, no plan to make it safe for businesses to reopen, no plan to reopen schools. In this time of national crisis, Donald Trump did what he always does. He lied. He bragged. He blamed. He never led because Donald Trump is not a leader. This time it's personal. Donald Trump's ignorance and incompetence is threatening your family's safety. It's not about Republicans or Democrats. It's about protecting our families.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
He failed. He must go. On November 3rd, vote to protect your family. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.